PNG to establish embassy in Vietnam. PNG launches election report. And Chinese group in town to understand logging issues.
This is National EMTV News with Helen Sayer.
Good evening and thank you for joining me for Thursday's news. The Prime Minister has announced plans to establish a full embassy in Vietnam as Papua New Guinea prepares to host APEC in 2018. Speaking at a news conference in Da Nang, Vietnam today, he said Papua New Guinea had a lot to learn from Vietnam, especially in the SME and technology sectors. Vietnam is the 45th largest economy in the world, with a lot of its businesses in the SME sector.
Many of the development challenges facing the country have not yet been resolved as Papua New Guinea takes on the huge responsibility of hosting the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meetings in Port Moresby. The Prime Minister, who will be taking over as chair of the APEC Leaders Summit, reiterated the benefits of taking on APEC responsibilities.
Papua New Guineans have to take advantage of this opportunity, and we need to step up. It is a unique challenge. Opportunity to showcase our country, opportunity for Papua New Guinea to take its rightful place in the global community.
The PM and the government delegation will also be taking back other important lessons from Vietnam. Even as the world's 47th largest economy, many of its businesses are SMEs. Of particular interest to PNG are the SME support structures and policies. High on the points of discussion is what they're calling the increased digitalization of smaller APEC economies. And simply put, it means access to internet technologies, mobile phones and communication. But access alone does very little if the people aren't able to use it to empower themselves.
One area that I'm very focused on is to try and create a more participation by Papua New Guineans in the digital economy. I am encouraged, as I said earlier, by Papua New Guineans' grasp of the technologies that are changing, and of course the applications that Papua New Guineans are developing to solving local issues, particularly in the area of education and health. There are Papua New Guineans creating applications that even government is using today.
In a rather simplistic look, the internet has changed the meaning of globalization. In the 21st century, globalization isn't about large companies taking over smaller organizations and becoming multinationals. It's about small-scale industries reaching a global market from the comfort of a mobile phone. Scott Waide, National EMTV News, Da Nang, Vietnam.
And for the latest, we cross over to Scott Waide in Da Nang City, Vietnam. Scott, as you've stated, and we'll come back to Scott Waide a little later on. Moving on, an observation report released by Transparency International states that the 2017 national election was not delivered effectively and efficiently. The report highlights that 34% of the voting population had their voting rights violated or taken from them. It also states that polling venues lacked election materials, including security personnel. However, Electoral Commissioner Patiles Gamato maintains that the 2017 election was successfully conducted compared to previous national elections.
The findings in the observation report are based on a nationwide survey conducted by 313 domestic election observers during the polling period. These observers covered 536 polling venues in Papua New Guinea. Over 1,520 voters were interviewed in the survey. Chairman of Transparency International, Lawrence Stevens, said key findings in this report are the violation of voters' right to secret voting, threats to voting on the polling day, and voters were offered bribe and asked to vote for a particular candidate.
We're saying even when there are not large numbers of people who have had their rights stolen, there are still significant numbers, and those people have deserve to be heard, deserve to have been able to vote and we've heard of too many people who have been not able to vote for all sorts of reasons.
The 2017 national election was conducted within a 3-month period from the issuing of writs, campaigning and polling, counting period, and the declaration of elected members. Electoral Commissioner Patelius Gamato said during the launch of the report that 400 million kina was budgeted for these elections. Gamato said the 2017 election was well conducted compared to the 2012 election and only recorded 77 election petitions at the courts. However, TIPNG Executive Director Arian Kasman says the Commissioner did not highlight certain issues like the lack of security during polling and the high violence experienced during the election period in all 4 regions.
The Southern Highlands was a special case. I think there is still fighting that's going on in this province. I also understand there's fighting in Hela. And it's disadvantaged a lot of things. So outside of the elections, we have students that were unable to sit for their exams. So all of these are having disastrous impact on everything else to do with the rest of the country. We need to acknowledge that the violence or the election-related violence in 2017 was extremely high.
Thakla Gunga, National EMTV News.
To complement the 45 million kina investment by the National Airports Corporation in upgrading the Girua Airport in Northern Province, the national government has allocated 3.5 million kina to PNG Power to roll out a transmission line from Popondetta to Girua. This comes under the government's rural electrification project being implemented by PNG Power and monitored by the Department of National Planning and Monitoring.
Girua Airport will no longer be the only airport in the country without power. The national government, through the Ministry of National Planning and Monitoring, presented a cheque of 3.5 million to PNG Power today to complete the 15-kilometer construction of PNG Power lines from Popondetta to Girua Airport.
This project will connect up to from Popondetta to Girua Airport, and that's about 20 kilometers. PPL has completed the initial 5 kilometers already to Hydro Bridge, and this funding is to complete the remaining 15 kilometers.
Minister for National Planning Richard Maru said it has been a long wait for the people of Ijibitari district to have access to power, and it is timely that the O'Neill government stepped in, as it is part of the government's plan to have 70% of every household in the country to have access to power by 2030.
So one of our key programs is to provide funds to PNG Power to support the rollout of electricity to all our rural communities, not only for them to enjoy a high standard of living if they build their homes and have access to power and be able to have fridge in the homes and have access to TV. Importantly, we also want to empower them to use electricity to go into business. That's a very important program for us. We need to empower our own citizens to go into businesses.
Maru said with this service that 2,000 people living between Popondetta and Girua will now have to take advantage of the service by venturing into SMEs to improve their quality of life. While challenging PNG Power to deliver the project on time, Maru also encouraged PNG Power to look at cost-efficient ways to supply power to its customers, as many businesses spend too much on power as a running cost.
I really would like to encourage the acting CEO and PNG Power to look at making sure that we have a strategy that looks at lowering the cost of power being sold to yourself and the grid, so that we can then look at how do we pass some of the savings to the consumers.
Stacey Yellow, National EMTV News.
National EMTV News continues after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. 80% of Papua New Guinea's round log exports end up in China. But in recent times, there has been concern about the origins of round logs from Papua New Guinea. Much of this on the back of reports by Global Witness in 2014, which claim much of these were from illegal logging areas. This week, a group from China is in the country to meet with various stakeholders in an effort to get a better understanding of the issues surrounding logging in the country.
The team from China met with representatives from a cross-section of the forestry industry today. The delegation was led by World Wildlife Fund and made up mostly of representatives from Chinese businesses who use timber products from PNG. Head of Market Practice at the WWF Beijing office, Xin Xinghao, spoke of the request for Chinese businesses to be reassured that timber they were importing from Papua New Guinea were coming from sustainable operations in line with international regulations.
As your country is one of the main source country, we do not want just simply don't buy and leave away. We don't want that. We want to find solutions. We believe we have solutions to find a way, make the trade legal, even sustainable.
The PNG Forest Authority is responsible for the management, development and protection of forests and forest products in the country and is at the forefront of the industry. Its acting managing director, Dr. Ruth Turia, addressed the gathering, providing an overview of the current conditions in PNG, especially at a time where there are still some concerns regarding special agriculture business leases, SABLs. According to Dr. Turia, whilst the country has made some progress in regards to cancelling illegal SABLs, challenges still remain. Among these challenges, landowner issues, high logging costs, high freight costs, as well as changes in government policy.
In the flag team, we're trying to ensure that what goes out of PNG is from a legal source. How we can bring development. So we've had some challenges with that.
The Papua New Guinea Forest Industries Association, the body that represents businesses within this key economic sector, were also present. PNG FIA representative Bob Tate spoke at the gathering today.
Until we get our own standard up and running, voluntarily follow the guidelines laid down in the Australian standard. That'd be my advice. But more importantly, make sure your log wholesalers in China apply the same standards for which you're looking for.
The varying views in the one place today gave an opportunity for the Chinese delegation to get first-hand information on the complexities of the forestry sector in PNG, which will be used to determine their next course of action. This will go a long way in determining the future of logging in PNG, as China receives 80% of Papua New Guinea's annual logging exports. Meribatulo, National EMTV News.
Medang's Morilon General Hospital is one of several hospitals in PNG seeing a large number of women with cervical cancer. Senior Specialist Medical Officer and Gynecologist Dr. John Bonga says most cancer patients go to the hospital when the cancer is at its advanced stage. The hospital sees at least 2 cervical cancer patients each week. However, this figure only represents those who go to the hospital to seek treatment. Dr. Bonga explains it is a challenge for them to look after patients with cancer of the cervix.
Morilon General Hospital is now looking at creating a prevention and treatment program for early cervical cancer. Gynecologist Dr. John Bogner says they want to create a dedicated place for women and young girls to have access to testing, detection and counseling on cervical cancer.
Get that sort of organized, and we are now in preparation to get this place organized, and women can come and have access to that facility so that we can look after our women folks in Medang, especially with prevention of cervical cancer and early detection.
Medical Services Director Dr. Vincent Atua says the new clinic will be named the Well Women's Clinic. The clinic will only be doing cervical cancer screening.
At the current time, the capacity we have to do a good screening for the population of Medang is limited. And so what we like to do is to have a clinic that does only cervical cancer screening. Because if we can deal with that one big problem, then we'll deal with virtually 80 to 90% of all the cancers in women.
At 4 p.m. yesterday, business houses and other sponsors led by the island's petroleum company handed over a 41,528 kina check to Dr. Atua. The money was raised through a fundraising event held in August.
Islands Petroleum organized what they call a color fun run. We sold t-shirts for 20 kina each. The beneficiary of the fundraising this year was the gynecology unit at Madang Modilons Hospital.
The money will go towards the refitting of an existing space in the hospital, which will be used for the clinic. It is hoped the clinic will be operational at the beginning of next year.
We already have acquired a piece of equipment that can help to treat smaller ulcers, smaller sized cancers. So the aim is that if we get the program up running very well and do screening, we can see women with early cervical cancer and actually treat them so that they can be cured. So because we now have the technology and the know-how to treat cervical cancer early, we're hoping that the start of this clinic will stimulate a radical approach to treating early cervical cancer.
We have a cervical surveillance sort of center for Modilon Hospital. That means that we would like to have programs that are for early detection of cancer of the cervix.
Masa Luis, National EMTV News, Madang.
And now looking at our finance news, the kina closed unchanged at $0.3115 in the interbank market. At Bank South Pacific, your kina was buying $0.304 $0.392 Australian dollars, €0.2584 and 34.25 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold is trading higher, coffee, cocoa and copra closed the day higher. Palm oil closed higher, crude oil is trading lower, while copper closed the day lower. And on the stock market, the Dow Jones closed at 6.13 points higher, the ASX closed at 33.14 points higher, and the All Ordinaries closed at 33.25 points higher. National EMTV News will be back with more after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the news. The 14th PNG Nurses Symposium held in Kokopo will present a list of recommendations to the National Health Department. The recommendations will include reports and researches of health issues compiled by the nurses and presented at the symposium. Nurses Association President Stephen Nawick says they are hoping the Health Department and medical institutions will take on board their recommendations.
The week-long PNG Nurses Symposium that began on Monday this week in Kokopo will end tomorrow. A broad range of health issues have been presented and discussed by those who gathered. Issues relating to infant and maternal mortality, malaria, HIV, amongst others. And tomorrow, during its closure, a list of recommendations that will contain the outcome of the symposium will be presented to health authorities. The PNG Nurses Association President Stephen Nawick says they hope to push for a recognition for the researches done by the nurses. Most of the findings are based on their experiences at their respective health clinics and compiled into reports about issues that they thought needs to be addressed.
Those that will go to health department and other stakeholders for service improvement and policy making, we will deliver that to them.
The 14th PNG Nurses Symposium is not a new thing. Similar gatherings have happened in previous years. Most of the findings and researches presented were based on how PNG can address its age-old issues in the country's health sector. and the symposium this week has yet again discussed the same problems faced by the nurses at their health clinics and hospitals all over the country. Most of this information have been repeated time and again, and most of them can easily be recited from memory.
We are looking at arranging, placing an arrangement with the university to try and publish some of those research papers.
While the recommendations will be presented tomorrow, there are still uncertainties if whether or not the issues highlighted in this year's symposium will be taken seriously by the responsible authorities. Edwin Fidelis, National EMTV News, Kokopo.
While the final autopsy report of late journalist Rosalind Albeniel Evara is yet to be released, Chief Pathologist Dr. Seth Forces is disappointed that his preliminary autopsy report was rejected by NCD Governor Poes Pakop. Pakop had called for a second opinion from doctors after the preliminary report into Rosalind's death found no evidence of injuries. Rosalind died under suspicious circumstances last month, and pictures of her bruised and battered body shown to mourners at her funeral service, which prompted investigations.
Accepted by PNG Medical Board, the coroner and the court, and as such it allows him to practice and give evidence in court as a medical expert witness. Forces stressed that the wider community must understand that the interpretation of the finding at autopsy takes into account information from CID homicide case officer, photographs, crime scene reports and other medical notes available at the time of post-mortem examination.
The views or statements that were expressed by our good governor in the newspaper basically reflects or shows that there's lack of understanding in the community and in the country that regarding the kind of work a pathologist does, the kind of training, the kind of skills, the kind of schooling that is required of someone to be fully qualified and be called a pathologist.
He said that the preliminary report and the upcoming final report is based on set standards of practice in forensic pathology, thus it enables the report to be admissible in court.
Duty is one, to perform coroner's post-mortem on behalf of the coroner in accordance to the Coroner's Act. 2, not to wrongfully hide any cause and circumstances of death. 3, provide unbiased medical legal opinions to the police, lawyers on the court based on my autopsy findings.
Meanwhile, the final report is expected to be completed next week, and Rosalind's family, especially her aunt, has refused to let her niece's death be another statistic.
More and more young women coming out of university or while at university or just building their career like Rosalind, they fall dead just like that at the hands of men.
Meanwhile, the case is now before the homicide squad, who has confirmed with EMTV that witnesses have been called to give evidence as they continue to investigate the matter. Stacey Yallo, National EMTV News.
The service providers against gender-based violence in Lae are prepared to implement the Family Protection Act. The act was passed by Parliament in 2013 and regulated by the Justice Department in April this year. A 3-day training program for the stakeholders ended in Lae today.
The aim of the workshop is to provide the stakeholders or service providers against gender-based violence with a training program on the provisions of the family protection legislation. This includes the Act, which was gazetted in 2013, and its enabling regulation formed in April this year by the Justice and Attorney General Department. The workshop began on Tuesday this week and ended today. Morbe's Provincial Welfare Officer Emily Bosky says the Act could help families from life-threatening issues.
It is like a mechanism now to help mothers, especially mothers, and it's a family protection act for the family units to protect them from life-threatening situations.
The Act protects the family from gender-based violence, especially on women and girls. It contains the protection order and the interim protection order, which helps to protect a family unit or marriage of couples. Police officer in charge of Lae's Family and Sexual Violence Unit, Sergeant Ruth Murup, says The Act has helped in many cases.
We've actually processed a lot of applications. Some people are processing plenty of IPOs. Mama and it has gone through. Plenty of cases have gone through. Mothers are being protected, the wives have been protected, even the husbands as well. Plenty of protection.
The training has helped stakeholders become familiar with the provisions of the Act and its enabling legislation. The service providers of victims of gender-based violence can now identify their key roles, functions and responsibilities pursuant to the legislation. Ms. Bosky says the training has helped them to identify and resolve challenges to implementing the legislation.
So the Family Protection Act is a mechanism now, legal legislation that is upfront now to help to deal with these situations of domestic violence. So it really is a tool to empower us to do our work.
Julie Badui Owa, National MTV News, Leh.
Meanwhile, the Family and Sexual Violence Unit and Leh Police have assisted over 200 victims of domestic violence this year through the Interim Protection Order or IPO under the Family Protection Act 2013. Officer in charge Sergeant Ruth Morup says a lot of IPO applications from victims have been successfully processed. Many victims of domestic violence in Leh are being protected through the IPO.
Plenty mama was mitoke all Fred lokam report. All thing was no good. Only come police put him all manbel behind bus na. All no got money lo pay him when bail or this kind of sem all Fred lokam out na report him. No good all caught him man barona put him kaiga lo table kind something was him so. IPO am good plus something where am come lo help him all a family unit, especially all Mary, so that they. Empower him all now must come outside and report him all violence.
And turning overseas, U.S. President Donald Trump's Asian trip continues today after touching down in China. The shop could be crucial as the president is hoping China's President Xi Jinping will intercede in the situation involving North Korea.
Red carpet welcome for President Trump here in China. This stop could be the most critical of this Asia tour. President Trump facing complex challenges on trade and North Korea's nuclear program. But before getting down to business, it was time for socializing. President Xi and his wife playing tour guide, showing President Trump and the First Lady Beijing's Forbidden City, treating them to a traditional Chinese opera and dinner. President Trump has said he and President Xi have an excellent relationship. This visit will be a big test of whether he can leverage that. Earlier today in Seoul, President Trump speaking before the South Korean legislature, but talking directly to Kim Jong-un, telling the North Korean dictator, do not underestimate and do not try the United States.
The weapons you are acquiring are not making you safer. They are putting your regime in grave danger. Every step you take down this dark path increases the peril you face.
The president saying there's a path to a better future for North Korea, but Kim Jong-un must do three things: end the aggression of his regime, stop the development of ballistic missiles, and a complete, total, and verifiable denuclearization. All week, President Trump has been putting public pressure on China to do more to isolate the North Korean regime. He said this week that President Xi has been helpful, but how helpful is still to be seen.
If you're put on the spot in front of hundreds of people, could you spell the word irrevocable? Well, a 9-year-old from Australia can, and she's just been crowned the winner of a prestigious New South Wales spelling competition.
The Olympics of the classroom, the state's best junior spellers under lights and cameras on this magnificent occasion.
Magnificent.
Magnificent. M-A-G-N-I-F-I-C-E-N-T, magnificent.
The quirks of the English language weren't so much of a bother.
Xylophone, X-Y-L-O-P-H-O-N-E, xylophone.
As the endless wait for their turn. It was tough going.
Can I restart?
Yes, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Catalyst.
And when you're 9, disappointment stings.
I needed to practice that word crochet.
45 whittled down to the final two.
I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
Irrevocable. IRREVOCABLE. Irrevocable.
That is correct.
My dad helped me practice and I read a lot of books.
And how proud is Dad today?
Yeah, I'm very proud of Alina.
It was the Premier's prize and even she was impressed.
I think I would have definitely had a few of them wrong.
And back home, the Brian Bell Group, in partnership with Sir Brian Bell Foundation, introduced their Christmas charity initiative today. Called the Sir Brian Bell Foundation Wishing Tree, this major event will raise over 200,000 kina from 5 kina burbles sold via Brian Bell home centres and other locations. 100% of all the funds raised will go to selected charities across Papua New Guinea this Christmas. Brian Bell Group CEO Mr. Cameron McKellar introduced the Sir Brian Bell Foundation Wishing Tree charity event at the Brian Bell Home Centre Gordons today. A large Christmas tree was erected in the centre of the shop, where burbles purchased from the counters were hung to show the amount of support flooding in. And by golly, the tree collected burbles pretty quick.
We're hoping that over the next sort of 6 weeks that we'll see a great deal of fundraising through this particular initiative, where every one of our customers will be presented the opportunity to essentially purchase a bauble for 5 kina at every one of our locations across the country in aid and support of those great charities and community groups.
In addition, the Sir Brian Bell Foundation will contribute additional funds of 20,000 kina to each of the selected charity organisations across Papua New Guinea. This year, Brian Bell has chosen 7 charity groups mostly associated with children, and they are Gateway Children's Fund in Port Moresby, Mama Rosa Orphanage in Mount Hagen, Callan Services in Kokopo, Family PNG in Lae, City Mission in Medang, Kundiawa General Hospital Children's Ward in Chimbu, and the West New Britain Provincial Hospital in Kimbe.
You see here today, and every customer in those locations has the same opportunity to purchase a bauble for 5 kina, and that'll be a direct donation straight after Christmas. Hope to fill this tree, and you won't be able to see any foliage at all. We want to cover them in these beautiful Sir Brian Bell Foundation baubles.
Only going for 5 kina, shoppers are encouraged to support this initiative and purchase burbles on which they can write down their names and or a Christmas wish before hanging the burble on the wishing tree. Also, there is no limit to the amount one has to spend to be able to purchase a burble. It has been made clear that this charity event is solely set apart to serve its cause. Therefore, every 5 kina spent on burble purchase is a shopper's donation to charity. This initiative takes effect today and will run right through to Christmas Day. All proceeds from the Sir Brian Bell Foundation Wishing Tree will be delivered to charities nationwide. Chukai Sports is next. Don't go away.
Chukai Sports.
Welcome to Chukai Sports. Members of the PNG LNG Kumals visited Waigani Primary School today. The players were greeted to many excited students waiting outside the school gates. Reese Martin, James Seguiaro, Ase Boas, Moses Meninga and Gary Lowe were at today's event. Different group of students danced for the players and also had the opportunity to ask questions. Vice Captain Ase Boas thanked the school for their hospitality. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill is confident the PNG Kumals will give a strong performance this weekend in their last home game in the Rugby League World Cup 2017 against the United States Hawks. A confident, enthusiastic and optimistic Prime Minister O'Neill spoke from Vietnam today, wishing the Kumals good luck and said, win or lose, the Kumals carry the country's pride.
No doubt that our team will certainly do their very best. Win or lose, they are our pride and pride of our country, and we look forward to a very strong match from them on coming Sunday. Unfortunately, we will not be there, but in spirit we are there supporting, doesn't matter where we are. So we look forward to them winning on Sunday, and of course, and beyond that, we will take one game at a time. Yeah.
NCD Governor Paul Sparkop has praised the Rugby League World Cup Committee and the Australian Rugby League for allowing PNG to co-host the games in the country. He says exposure has lifted the country's profile, showing its potential in hosting international sporting events. The government and NCD paid 5 million kina to hold the 3 rugby league matches in Port Moresby.
The NCD Governor says hosting international events like the 2017 Rugby League World Cup has brought many positive outcomes for the country. For the past 2 months, PNG participated in the Rugby League World Cup trophy campaign tour around the country and held the international matches in Port Moresby.
National government, co-sponsored the 3 games with the national government contributing 5 million, NCDC contributing 5 million. So. In terms of our other goals, we have achieved that too. First, to promote our city and PNG. I've requested the Rugby League World Cup to give us teams that will enable us to not only play high-quality rugby league, but also to promote our city and our country. And also the Rugby League World Cup Secretariat, they have, withstand the challenge. I think over the last year, events like the student unrest, some other events to come to give some, question mark on our ability to host it. I think some incident on Digital Cup, it raised a lot of questions. But we have shown that we can host such events, as we have shown before. So I want to thank Australian Rugby League and also, secondly, Rugby League World Cup.
The international exposure is a way forward for the country, showcasing its capabilities to host international events like it has in the past with the 2015 Pacific Games, the FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup and other events like the ACP Summit. Governor Parkop says having the PNG Kumals play on home soil is also a platform to inspire young up-and-coming players.
We can do it again. If Arebo and his teammates can beat the Kiwis, let's bring them on. Let's have confidence we can beat them again. So, but in terms of inspiring young people, inspiring the nation, building national sort of cohesion or unity, I think we've achieved that too with this success of the Kumals and how we have hosted the games. So I think that's a big plus for the city and for the country, for Rugby League.
Meanwhile, one area of improvement is the ticketing of seats for the matches.
The Eastern Wing and Western Wing, even in the main grandstand too, you buy a ticket, but you are not guaranteed a seat because they don't sell seats, they sell tickets only. So we got to change that.
The patriotic governor is calling on all NCD residents to come in full support for the last game this weekend, where the Kumals will be going up against the USA Hawks. Marilyn Diaukatam, National EMTV Sports.
Trukai Sports continues after the break. Stay tuned.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome back to Trukai Sports. The PNG Orchids have just 6 days to go before they meet England in their Rugby League World Cup debut next Thursday. And while Papua New Guinea sees a team of women heading into a competition level no other female Papua New Guinean Rugby League team has been to before, 19-year-old Gloria Kaupa's family and friends back in Goroka, Eastern Highlands Province will see their daughter, sister and friend carry Papua New Guinea's name on her shoulders.
Hailing from a mixed parentage of Western and Eastern Highlands provinces, Gloria Kaupa was not one to be swayed by the demands Grade 12 studies presented. To Kaupa, rugby league training was just as important. The Orchids forward, who recently sat for her grade 12 national examination at Goroka Secondary School, said her interest in rugby league came at an early age.
I was doing my grade 8. I was inspired by my cousin, who was always, when I always finished school, he was always going to training, and when I started following him to training, I was inspired by the intensity of the training, and that's why I was interested and I joined it.
The love for the sport blossomed at the age of 14 when Kaupa took up a rugby ball and never put it back down. And the decision to continue playing rugby league is one she now does not regret. It took a lot of training and eventually the Highlands Zone Rugby League tournament mid this year that brought her to Ley to put the 19-year-old on the Orchids selection radar. By September, Kaupa was an Orchid.
Yeah, we were after the first trial. When we went back, they sent the programs, and we were. When I went to school, every afternoon I did my training, and it was really demanding. But I loved the game, and I did whatever it takes to for my studies and as well as my fitness for training. I know that I have a really big responsibility, and I still have to do it, and I still do it.
Kaupa had this to say to young girls around Papua New Guinea.
Sports is not always for men. It's a gender equity thing, and if you really want to play, and you can play. It's not that hard. You just have to prioritize.
Speaking of a people back home, or what Goroka people like to refer to as houseline, Kaupa says everyone is just as excited as she is.
Yeah, they're proud. They told me to call them of the dates, but I didn't call them yet. But I hope they're waiting, and I will tonight.
Next Thursday, the 19-year-old forward will face England along with her teammates in the first ever World Cup match in a triple header in Sydney.
I'm really proud, and it's a dream come true.
Dina Rose Raiko, National EMTV Sports.
NCD Governor Poes Pakop says plans are in place for the completion of the Sir Hubert Murray Stadium in Port Moresby. He said it is expected to hold a capacity of 25 to 30,000 seats and will follow through with the original plan of inbuilt facilities similar to the other two stadiums in the city. The stadium was one of the proposed sporting venues for the 2015 Pacific Games but was not completed in time and has been left incomplete for more than 2 years.
Be about 6-story. It will have probably 2 restaurants. We might have a swimming pool and a gym there, and it will have a lot of corporate boxes. So we are following the same plan, but it will be outstanding stadium once we finish. What I would like to see at Sir Hubert Murray is that you buy a ticket, you get a seat, and I want to encourage PNG Sport Foundation and their managers to try to achieve that in the 2 stadiums we have now.
And that ends Trukai Sports. The weather details up next.
Trukai Sports. Trukai Sports.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield, with doing with Dulux.
Looking at the weather forecast for tonight in the southern region, evening showers with possible thunderstorms in Port Moresby, Kerema and Popondetta, cloudy with rain periods in Daru and showers in Alatau. In the Momasi region, few showers in Ley, brief showers in Medang and mostly fine in Wewak and Vanimo. In the New Guinea Islands region, few showers in Lorengau, Kavieng and Buka and evening showers and thunderstorms in Kokopo, Rabaul and Kimbe. And in the Highlands region, evening showers then morning fog expected in all centres.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield, with doing with Dulux.
And that's the way it is this Thursday, 9th of November 2017. From the entire news team, I'm Helen Seah. Pleasant viewing. Good night.